Okay, members, can I remind you that this meeting will be recorded, and ask you to note that mobile phones should be switched off as they interfere with the recording. Tablet devices should be switched to mute. Can I remind members to declare their interest as appropriate throughout the meeting. Can I advise members that we will move into closed session towards the end of the meeting to discuss the forward work programme. Can I declare the meeting open to the public? Are there any apologies?
Definitely earlier.
Joe Burns.
I'm joking. Apologies. Can we then move to agenda item 5? We're going to have an oral briefing from NISRA, Anti-Poverty and Social Inclusion. Can I refer members to the memo from the clerk at page 58 to 60 and papers from NISRA at page 61 to 94. Can I welcome Dr. Tracy Power, Director of Analysis, and Robert Beattie, Head of Consensus. Can I ask you to take up to 10 minutes to give your briefing, and then we'll ask some questions. Thank you.
Okay, thank you very much, Chair. I've been in NISRA now for about 5 months, and part of my responsibility is the measures of deprivation. And Robert here is the head of census and chaired the last couple of steering groups on the updates of the Noble indices. So hopefully we'll be able together to answer any questions that you have. I know that you've been talking to a lot of people about the measurement of deprivation. I wasn't intending to actually click through on this because I think you've got it in front of you. Would you prefer that I click through on here as well? Or are you happy that I just talk to the papers?
It's okay, we just talk to the papers.
Okay.
Yeah.
Fine. I know that you've been talking to a lot of people, and we are very happy to be here in terms of the review that you're doing, because it's not often that statisticians get out to talk to people and users about the measures that they develop. So we are very interested in what your review quite seriously will show us, and we can talk maybe in question time about how you see this moving forward in terms of the application of and use of the multiple deprivation indices. Okay, well, what we've done is we've acknowledged up front that there are rural issues, and we've known that for quite some time through all of the iterations of the measurements of deprivation. And the issue is, as you've heard from many of your witnesses, is that because the super output areas, which cover about 2,000 people, cover large physical areas, it's difficult to find the concentrations of deprivation in rural areas, where in urban areas it's easier to find. So what NISRA has done, and it formed part of your papers, was develop rural guidance for use in policy areas which deliberately want to target rural areas, and you have that as part of your paper, and I'm happy to answer any questions on that later. But what we would say generally in NISRA is that the multiple deprivation measure itself, as a combination of all the domains, is not always necessarily the best measure to use. And we would recommend that policymakers and users and resource allocation experts look at the domains themselves first, rather than the multiple deprivation measure, to see if there are any domains which meet the policy needs. And the proximity to services domain is the one that we would say meets the rural needs, because it highlights the relative rankings of rural areas better than urban areas. But there's no doubt it's an issue, and it's an issue across all of the UK as well as here. So I'm just going to give you a little bit of background. Hopefully you can follow this as I go through in the notes, because I don't have a wee clicker here to do it on the screen. So the rural issues have been acknowledged way back in the Robson indices, which were developed in 1994. So that's 20 years ago we started all of this stuff, looking at indicators to try and measure deprivation. And the Robson report did acknowledge that the structure of the urban and rural deprivation, when you compared them, was different. And there was talk at that time about census variables such as car ownership and whether or not that would be useful. And it was felt that that wouldn't be useful because it had a differential kind of impact, and it said something different about rural areas than urban areas. So it's just to acknowledge to you that this isn't a new issue, and it has been something that we've been struggling with as a collective analyst community over the last 20 years. Moving on now to the process of the deprivation measure development, and in 2010 indices were managed by Robert's Interdepartmental Steering Group, which had all government departments represented on it. And as you can see there, Housing Executive, Rural Development Council, who've been very helpful to us along the way, NICFA, the Equality Commission, and the Chief Executive's Solus. We most recently updated the Noble indices, which would have been the third time that we've used this approach, similar to the rest of the UK. And it is effectively the UK standard in terms of the methodology, and that's useful to us, not in terms of comparing the results, but we have kind of a community now of statisticians throughout the UK that we can talk to around their methodology and how things are changing over time. I think one of the most important things about the process is, even though the steering group had multi-agency representation, is that we did a wide consultation afterwards in terms of putting the proposals that the steering group had come up with and getting people's ideas and input. So we had 3 public meetings, and then we had a written consultation to which there were over 130 replies. Moving on then, I know that there are other ways of looking at deprivation, but in terms of the approach that NISRA takes, there are certain requirements that we need from the indicators that we use, and they're here, and I'll not go through them individually, but basically we need small area, good quality data that covers all of Northern Ireland, and that it is a major feature of deprivation, so it's something that everyone can intuitively understand as being related to deprivation. The problem we have here with measuring deprivation is that nobody actually knows what the deprivation is. So it's not like we have a variable that we can look at other variables and how they affect it. Deprivation is, by its very nature, a difficult thing to measure and get a handle on. That's the essential problem here. So we use indicators which are direct measures of deprivation, and what I mean by that is you can intuitively understand that deprived people have these things happen to them. So you can understand that a lack of employment would be an effect of deprivation, or a low income, or all the other kinds of indicators of poor health and so on. So they're not linked statistically to deprivation in terms of they have a relationship. They're actually direct measures that that people can intuitively understand, and I think that's a very important kind of dimension to get our heads around. And also that they are proper numbers, and what I mean by that is that you can see what the relationship is between the rankings in terms of the least deprived to the most deprived. So there's not strange things happening in there in terms of the indicators that we use. So let me just talk a little bit about geography, because it's important if you've read the guidance on how to use these indices for rural areas. In the 2010 work, we use the super output areas as our main output, and certainly works for the urban areas. But we also have output areas which are smaller. So there are 890 super output areas, and I've given you a map there with no data in it, which shows you what Northern Ireland looks like at the super output area level. And then if you go to the next slide, you'll be able to see the output areas, which are much smaller in geographical area. There's over 5,000 of them, and they have 350 people within the area. So that obviously can target smaller concentrations of deprived people than the super output area would do. So our guidance for rural areas is that if you want to use a multiple deprivation measure, which is the combined one of all the domains, we have supplied multiple deprivation measures at output area level. And I think it comes back to what you've heard from other people for your committee review, is that it's the use made of these measures which is extremely important, in that the users need to understand what they're doing with it and what they want to use it for before they start diving into the numbers. So NISRA would say, if you want to use multiple deprivation measure, check out the output area level for rural areas, but that we would still recommend the proximity to services domain as your number one kind of go-to measure in terms of deprivation in rural areas. So moving on, apologies, my throat is a little bit croaky, but hopefully we'll get through this okay. Moving on then to the components, you know all of this stuff, but I'm just going to run through it again. So there's the 7 domains of deprivation and the weights that are given. It's important to realise that those weights are agreed weights. They were agreed by the executive, and they are based on a discussion around the steering group table and with consultees around what are the most important deprivation indicators in terms of predicting and measuring deprivation. And also there's an element there as well about the robustness of the data that make up each of those domains. So that was the discussion that was held around the table, and those are the weights that were ratified by the executive ministers both in 2005 and 2010. Are we okay in terms of following this, or would you rather I tried to do it on the screen?
I think everyone's okay.
Everyone's okay. Good. Okay. I've given you the indices that make up the actual proximity to services domain because that's the one that would most interest you. And you can see that it's travel time to all of those services. You've probably seen that before. Travel time to accident and emergency gets a double weighting because it was felt by the steering group that was the most important element in terms of service provision. But there's a range of services there, so we feel that that's a good domain in terms of rural proximity. And now what I've given you are the maps in terms of super output areas. And then output areas, just to illustrate that point I was making earlier about it's important to look at what the geography is that you want to do your analysis, what level of analysis you want to do. And the output area, if you go to the slide, shows you that if you look at the top 10% of areas using the MDM output area, you do get rural wards. One of the things that is commonly said is that the top 10%, which is known as a decile, doesn't give you any rural areas at super output area level, and that is absolutely correct. But if you go to output area level, you find that you've now homed down into smaller areas and you do pick up the rural deprivation. The guidance note that you received actually highlights the areas which come out as deprived in rural areas at the top 10%. And you'll know these areas better than me, but if you look at that slide, you've got places like Crossmaglen, Guildford, Stewarttown, Dungiven, Pomeroy, Newton Stewart, Glenderg, Newton Hamilton, so on, that come out if you use the output area. So I think it's back to this point that the users need to understand the complexities of these data and use the appropriate measure when they're trying to target, particularly when they're dealing with rural deprivation. I'd like to move on now to the future of the multiple deprivation measures and where we're taking it. It has been updated every 5 years, around about every 5 years so far, 2005, 2010. The position in the rest of the UK is that Wales has just published their updated deprivation measures. There is a little bit of a difference between an update and a review. An update would be taking the methodology that's currently in place and the indicators that are generally currently in place and just putting the more recent data into those. A review would be a more detailed look at whether or not those indicators are still the most relevant ones or whether we want to change the weightings or the methodology. So there are options for what we might like to do around this. Wales just simply did an update. England is currently consulting on an update and they're planning to publish their indicators next year, 2015, and Scotland will be doing something similar and publishing in 2016. So Northern Ireland, we are waiting for OFM and the Statistics Coordinating Group, which is a cross-departmental group, to give us direction on the way forward and what they might like us to do. I personally, now that I'm kind of in this area, would be very excited about doing an update or a review because I think there's some very important issues that have arisen that makes the 2010 indicators, not just for rural areas but more generally, a little bit old now. And those things are that we have next year are new local government districts. and we obviously need to provide them with some information about their small areas, which will be different from the ones that are currently in the 2010 publications. We've got the 2011 census, and those populations haven't been included in the multiple deprivation measures, and we'd like to do that. But I think the main thing that has changed over the last 4 years has been the work that NISRA's been doing on administrative data sources. We've really come on leaps and bounds in terms of our ability to analyse administrative data sources at small area level. We've been working very hard in terms of planning for the next census, but also working on an ESRC-funded project around administrative data. And we feel that our admin data sources are improved, and there's extra information there now through legal gateways being able to look at very small area level information, that we think that there could be some major improvements that we could make to the quality of the analyses. And then not forgetting, of course, that the steering group did a recommendations paper, which had a number of recommendations in it for the next review or update. And there are a number of those which we feel we already have in the bag. It would be very little work to do that kind of update or review. I've given you a slide there. One of the major recommendations was that there should be a closer look at the rural aspects of this, which is, of course, where your review would provide a very good platform to start that work. But there are a lot of recommendations in here which would affect, even on first look, the rural-urban dimension, the differentials between urban and rural areas. So it's by no means a foregone conclusion that looking at all of these would mean that the rural deprivation increases, the measurement of that increases differentially compared to the urban areas, but it's certainly something that we would like to take a look at, and the slide shows you a number of recommendations which could potentially affect that dichotomy. Happy to go into any of those if you wish to. So in summary then, just as my throat is about to give up, what I would say to you is there are issues, you've heard about them. We in NISRA think that that we've given pretty good guidance to users in terms of what those issues are and how the current measures can be best used, depending on whether the policy is spatial, what policy area it relates to, and that NISRA is there to give guidance. We are open for people, for statisticians and departments, policymakers and departments, to approach us to get guidance how to use the current measures in the way that is most appropriate to the user's needs. So that's a very quick sorry about that in terms of the clicker.
Okay.
But happy to answer any questions.
Thank you very much for your presentation. Given the problems that we have with the measurement of rural deprivation, what further research does NISRA consider is needed to further identify rural deprivation?
Well, some of the big rural issues are things like the benefit uptake rate that is perceived as a higher rate of lack of uptake in rural areas. We don't have any evidence to show us that in terms of the Northern Ireland distribution of benefit uptake. So we would work with DSD, who are currently doing some work on this in terms of small area income estimates. That's one of the administrative databases that I referred to generally earlier that we didn't have in 2010. So looking at those kinds of data would be a big issue to help identify whether or not the anecdotal evidence, which we've heard a lot of, is actually borne out by the data. So that would certainly be one thing that we would do. Another aspect of the recommendations paper had a lot of these areas spelled out. But another aspect would be further research into the effect of having the supply element of health services in urban areas. It was felt the last time around that we needed to adjust for that if we were to look at it again. So the recommendations paper, Chair, really sets out a lot of areas that we would intend to look at which would affect, as I said, the differential. I think the slide that I had there points out a lot of issues that would would affect the rural areas.
If I could just chip in with one there, that I think one of the current strengths is our proximity to services domain, which is very specifically aimed at rural deprivation, but it is just proximity to services, and in the work that we did in the 3 runs through of the multiple deprivation measures, every time we consult about it, everybody raises up the issue of, well, it's one thing to be 5 miles or 10 miles away from somewhere, but it's public transport and your accessibility to the actual services, which is equally important. And that's something that we've been aware of that for quite a while, and hopefully perhaps TransLink would have more information of that, and that could perhaps extend it from a proximity to services to an actual access to services. And that's another element we could certainly look at in the future.
Okay. And you did say on the benefits issue, DSD with their remit, yeah. Okay.
DSD are doing a lot of really interesting work around building, as I said, through these legal gateways that we have, through the work that we're doing on administrative data, building a small area income estimate database which looks at types of income, whether households are taking all the benefits that they are entitled to. And if we had that at Northern Ireland level, as I said, in terms of the kinds of indicators that we look at, that would be a very rich data source for us to be able to see what's happening in rural areas.
Okay. Joanne Dobson.
Thank you, Chair. Can I thank you for your briefing? And I'm aware of the 3 neighbourhood renewal areas in my own constituency and of the great work that they do to support local communities. I was going to ask, but the Chair's touched on this, how more you could feel, what more you feel could be done to identify deprivation in with regard to the wider rural context, but you have sort of touched on that. So can I ask then, when the 2005 and 2010 research was being conducted, how did you ensure that deprivation was identified as accurately in rural areas as it was in urban areas?
Maybe start by saying, first of all, that as Tracy said, all the indicators that go into the measures had to be sufficiently robust and had to be available across all of Northern Ireland. So not even just urban and rural, just across the board. So if there was we did, for example, some people put forward social capital as a variable of interest, and it certainly has got potential. But in terms of the data sets, what you end up with social capital is you end up with a little project, in Lisburn, a little project in Newry, and we haven't got Northern Ireland-wide coverage. So I think the indicators that go into it are equally applicable and equally robust across all of Northern Ireland. With regard to the ensuring that it covers all aspects of deprivation, if you go back to the actual domains themselves, our starting point was that we've got 7 domains, which we believe covers the types of deprivation that people and households would experience. We believe it's fairly comprehensive. It's been through 3 runs now, 3 sets of consultations. And I think that's about what I want to say initially.
So you're saying that you're satisfied that it was robust enough?
I suppose I wouldn't want to say we can always improve it, but I think it's a fair thing to say that it's fairly wide-ranging coverage and all the indicators are sufficiently robust.
Based on the 7 indicators?
Based on the 7 domains with all the indicators that sit underneath them, yeah.
So then when will you be going back to look at the next set of research, and how will you take stock of the additional funding which has been undertaken in existing areas?
I will take stock, sorry.
Of the additional funding and work which has already been carried out in existing areas, how will that be filtered into it?
Well, as I said earlier, we haven't been commissioned yet to do either an update or a review. But these indicators are national statistics. I'm sure you're aware of that process. And so we are duty bound to consult with users. That's part of having that national statistics status, and that's what we're intending to do. So we're doing that at the moment. I'm going to ask users and departments whether they feel we need to update. So say we get past all of that, what we'll do is we will get another group together, and when we get that group together, we will start the work again, and we will say, okay, who around the table knows of anything that's been happening more recently? So using all of the information that you're referring to that's been that wasn't perhaps available to us 5 years ago, and that would be part of the work to try and mine all of the good data, the new data, the applicable data that are out there, to build what we would hope would be an even better set of measures, and that is work that we would very much enjoy and want to do.
But there's currently no.
We haven't been commissioned to do it. This is not cheap. This is expensive. and we need it to be supported in terms of finance. Obviously, with the budget situation the way it is, there's no surety that is actually going to be something that happens. We're talking for a review in the region of £250,000. That's the kind of money to update these measures. So that's the situation that we're in. We'll be ready to talk about being commissioned. We're ready to do that work in terms of we think that we need to do it, keep up with the rest of the UK, but we haven't started it.
Finally, Chair, then, when you're compiling your statistics, is there a UK standard or all regions applying different measures to identify deprivation? What I'm getting at, would it be possible to be classes deprived in one region of the UK but not in another based on where you live?
Okay, so the UK, the 4 countries of the UK use the same methodology. What I mean by that is they build domains with indicators, and then they do analysis to build a multiple deprivation measure. But because of the way that we're all different in terms of the data that we collect, the admin sources that we have, the policies that we have to collect admin data, we don't use the same indicators. In fact, I would say that Northern Ireland is in some areas very much ahead in terms of the small area data that we collect. For instance, one of the census questions that I'd very much like to use was a new question this year around, or in 2011, around causes and reasons for disability. And we have that small area disability information now, and England and Wales do not.
Is that unique to Northern Ireland then?
Scotland have it as well.
Okay.
But England and Wales does not. And that to me would seem to be a very rich data source in terms of finding out, is there even a rural-urban dimension to disability? So
it is tailored to suit Northern Ireland?
Yes, but to answer your question then, we can't compare on a UK ranking, but we can say that we use a similar methodology to arrive at the multiple deprivation measures.
Okay, thank you. Thanks, Chair.
Oliver McMullen.
Chair, thank you, and thank you for your presentation. Very interesting. I'm one of the opponents of the deprivation method. I think it does more harm than good. And I'm coming from a point of view of, for example, grant aid, etc. We still have this anomaly in some areas of the rural areas where you have one side of the street qualifies and the other side of the street doesn't. In this day and age, that shouldn't be, but that's the way it is in some areas of my constituency. The thing about immigration has not been hit on there, and I think should be looked at. The benefit take-up, I'm glad to see that in because of the new benefits, the whole proposed cuts in the benefits. It's going to have a real effect. But I think we need to move away with looking at comparing urban with rural. I think we need to start comparing rural with rural, urban with urban, because I don't think urban with rural with urban is like for like. I think that creates problem in its own. There's a lot of other things there, like when we talk about, you have that window now of information on disability. Part of the problem there in disability, there's no central register here for disability, and I think that's the problem here of the department, which not so long ago actually came out again and said there's no need for it. Where I would argue, yes, there is a need for it, and I think you would agree with that. There's more and more with the 11 council model now. There's more and more of a centralisation of services, possibly moving out of the rural area into urban areas, and that's going to cause a problem in itself, having to move out, one-car families, where do they go? You know, it's the whole thing. Rural poverty and rural social isolation is not mentioned in it at all, and I think should be part of that, because we don't finish the Mara project, and what it is showing up, I think that's worth using as information. I could go on all day.
Yeah, there's a lot of interesting points there,
Yes.
absolutely.
Chair,
Okay.
Yes.
Have we asked your question yet? Yeah.
No. No.
Very diplomatic, Chairman.
You keep doing this to me, Ennis.
Oh,
No, but we'll stop there.
okay. Declan McAleer.
Thank you, Chair, and very apologies for the late. Actually, had a meeting, believe it or not, with the Hungarian ambassador. But just a couple of points. I'm sorry to be late, and if anything has been covered, I apologise. It's just I know that myself and others, we would speak a lot with rural organisations and individuals, and there is a strong feeling that the measures which you have do not accurately reflect the level of poverty and deprivation in rural areas. And obviously, if we're targeting social need and they're using that as a measure, then rural areas aren't going to fare out that very well. And I think one of the bugbears is the fact that when you're weighting your MDM score, there's only 10% that is awarded to proximity to services. Now, if you take the social output area just right where I live in the junction of, it's number one most deprived in the whole of the north in terms of access to services. Yet because that's only balanced at 10%, I won't tell you, because it's only balanced at 10%, when it's fed into the overall thing, it doesn't come up as being deprived in the top 20%.
Yeah.
And, we know the area is deprived, there's a lack of services, there's lack of opportunities for people, but that's not reflected in those measures. What's your view on the weightings?
Apologies, because I'm not just sure what exactly point you came in and what I'd had said and what I hadn't said. So apologies if I'm.
The point is that the fact that there's like 25 in the MDM score. There's something like 25% for income, 25% employment. But there's only 10% of weighting awarded to services, and that as a result of bringing rural areas right down the MDM.
Okay, so there's a few points in there. I've put up the output area map. And what I'd said, and it says it in the rural guidance for rural areas, is that if you take the super output areas and you look at the top 10%, you're absolutely correct. There's no rural wards will come out, or rural super output areas will come out in that measure. It's back to the point about the use and the intelligent use of the measures to figure out what are we really looking at, something that it is reasonable to say there should be no rural areas in it. Sometimes policymakers are, sometimes they're not, and they want to target rural areas. If they want to, there's other things that they can do. So they can use a multiple deprivation measure at output area, and that shows that there are rural output areas that fall within the top decile. What you can also do is you can use what are called quintiles, which are the 20% rather than the 10. There's no guidance that NISRA puts out that says you have to use deciles. You could use 20%, you could use 50%. There doesn't have to be that threshold. You can use whatever you think is reasonable to do so. In terms of the proximity to services, you're quite right, it is 10%. And I was at pains to point out in the presentation that those weights were based on input from the steering group in terms of what was intuitive, because people do say, this is what they say, economic and employment deprivation are the big drivers, and they were then agreed in the public consultation and by the executive ministers. So, and they haven't changed, Robert, over the past
No, the rates haven't
years.
changed. But I think the one I would add to what Tracy has said is that when we first put out our so-called noble measures back in 2001, I'm just going to quote you some of the guidance that we said. This is 15 years ago, and we're still saying it today, that the 7 domain scores, that's the income and employment and so forth, are the key outputs of the research. One of NISRA's recommendations is that the domain scores should be used when they are appropriate targeting tools. So if you are working in a rural area and you want to target rural deprivation, then whoever that policyholder is, or the department, they're totally free to use proximity to services as the measure of deprivation, should they so wish. They could take it with employment. The MDM is there if you are targeting deprivation in some wide sense, and its weights have been signed off by the executive, but it is only if you haven't got a topic-specific target for your deprivation. So if it's a programme on rural deprivation, if you're using the proximity to services domain and giving a much higher weighting, you're quite at liberty, whoever's in charge of the programme is quite at liberty to give it a much higher weighting than the 10% that's given in the MDM.
And just then, sort of follow on. Obviously, income is valued as weighted at 25%, which is fair enough. But that doesn't take account of the fact that if you live in a rural area, it's higher cost to live in a rural area. I know there's a lot of work done. I think it was a church in Scotland has done a lot of work around this here. They reckon it's around 20% more costly. And just recently, last week, a close relative of mine moved from the city here to live back down in Tyrone, where we're from, and just instantly they've had to buy a second car, and instantly they're going to have probably £100 a week of diesel or fuel to travel to the city to their work. So automatically they move then from, their disposable income is just wiped out because they're now living in a rural area. So these measures might look at income, that's grand, but it doesn't take account of the fact that if you live in a rural area, that the expenditure you have for living there is much, much higher.
I suppose I've got two responses to that. First of all, the proximity to services is, in a sense, a measure of that. And it's one of the costs is you've got to go farther to get the services. With regard to the general point about prices being higher in rural areas, that is the sort of thing we would be more than happy to look at in a review. And back to the point I made earlier on, that anything that goes into these measures has to be robust and available across all of Northern Ireland. If there's robust information on prices differentials, then that's entirely the sort of thing that we would build into such a review.
It's not even the prices, it's the fact that you have to buy a second car and you have to travel 10 times up and down the road to access services. That just wipes out your disposable income, and and then using income as some sort of a measure of poverty deprivation, it becomes inaccurate because it doesn't mean the same in urban areas as it does in rural areas where all your services are right on your doorstep.
I can only concede that you're making very good points, and if we had some hard data which we could use to quantify that and put it in, if we go into the measures, if that data was available, I'd be more than happy to look at it in any review coming up.
Sorry for drawing it out, Chair, but I know that I think it's the Joseph Rowntree Foundation has done quite a bit of work on this in Scotland, so perhaps it would be an idea to take a lift of some of the work that they've been doing just to test it and maybe apply their measures here.
More than happy to look at that sort of information.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you.
Okay. Any other questions?
Just that, Chair,
no question.
quickly, when we look at Scotland and England as examples, we have to bear in mind that Scotland and England and Wales have a different system of government than we have here, where the local authorities do fund a lot of things there that we don't get funded here, such as care for the elderly, health and all of that there. We are out on a limb here, and as Declan talks about their disposable income, transport and all of that there, in Scotland Wales have got, we don't have. So therefore, to use them as a measure in a lot of the cases that we deal with here would be inaccurate. We need to be looking at this on its own here.
Northern Ireland has a standalone measure, and the rankings are for the areas in Northern Ireland alone, from 1 right up.
You see, in my area that I come from, an urban area ranks better off than where I do, which is totally an inaccurate picture of a rural area. An urban area ranks higher in deprivation than a rural area. There has to be something wrong with the way it's calculated.
I'm not familiar with the particular
Well, I'm from the
areas.
Glens area, and the only area in there that's ranked high is Glendon. And the other areas, an urban area ranks higher, and that again is totally inaccurate because we're not liking. As I say, we're still going urban and rural comparison. I think we need to go urban with urban, rural with rural, and I think we would get a different picture in a lot of things.
Again, I'll go back to my point that it's back, and the point Tracy made about it's all about the use of the measures. We do produce them for all of Northern Ireland because people want to compare across all of Northern Ireland. As I said earlier on, if you've got a rural policy, there's nothing stopping a rural policy directorate in taking the access to services domain and giving it a much higher weighting. And I would imagine that the Glens of Antrim would come out quite highly on the access to services domain.
Yeah, and as you quite rightly say, that's right, Jared, for very quickly, that there is a lot of information that we don't have here that we should have. Like there's no central register for disability. That makes the job harder, and we're not getting a true reflection of it.
That's why the census question will be very helpful to us, because it has got small area level disability information.
Thanks,
Okay.
Chair.
Sidney Anderson.
No, thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. Apologies also for arriving late. The take-up of benefits we talk about is certainly an issue that I think has been looked at for a number of years now by DSD and others. I'm just wondering, what evidence do we have that there's a lot of benefit out there, or do we know that they're not, the rural people who are entitled to this are not picking up on that? Because, and also, what assistance is being given by the likes of DSD and others to touch base with those people, to maybe reach out to them?
So I'm a DFP statistician, so I can't answer about DSD policy. But what I can say,
do we know anything? Have you got any information coming back from DSD?
DSD statisticians are now building a database that will allow them to find out where there is high levels of non-uptake of benefits. And they're in the process of doing that, so the data haven't been analysed. They're going through the technical building of the database, but they're working with us, and we're working with them. We're keeping in close contact, because once they have those data, they're using it for their policy needs to be able to target individuals who aren't taking the benefits that they need, and they will obviously have some policy to answer your second question. But the data themselves will enable us to analyse at small area where there may be non-benefit uptake higher relatively than in other areas. Now, the anecdotal evidence would be that there might be an urban-rural dimension to that, in which case we would build it into any future measure of deprivation.
There's obviously a large amount of work in this here to get this.
Oh my goodness, that's £250,000. That's what it's going. That's what it would cost
to get this up and running.
Yeah.
And to get those statistics is going to take some time.
I'm delighted that you recognise that it's hard work.
Yeah, it is. Yeah, I do recognise that, because I have touched it in other areas in relation to this, but I think we have to do everything we can and make efforts to ensure that we get down into those areas and those issues to make sure that we touch base with those people, because it's quite obvious that there's a lot of benefit there is not being taken up. Maybe the facts and figures will show up in future. I think, maybe, Robert, you touched on did you mention TransLink?
Yes, I mentioned, transport and rural areas. Yes.
Yeah, well, rural transport and TransLink and is practically in some areas non-existence, really, when you look at it, to access services. How do we get that up and running and moving, and what?
Well, all I can say is that in the previous reviews, as I said earlier on, we've got this proximity to services, which we think is a good measure. It could be improved greatly if we could overlay it with, the ability to access the services, which involves the availability and the frequency of public transport, buses and so forth. So that was raised previously. And TransLink, at the last review, told us that, as ever, they were working on things. So if and when this new review comes up, I think one of the things we certainly will be doing, we're going to talk to TransLink and say, well, what information have you now got on the location, the frequency of all your services across Northern Ireland? And that hopefully would feed into and improve the proximity to services measure.
Do you think it would prove to be access to service will be a problem that will be probably one of the bigger issues? You'll see.
I think access to services it stands to reason to my mind that if you live in a city and you can hop on a bus near an A&E hospital, whereas if you're 20 miles away and you've got to have a car or get a bus or a taxi, clearly there's an element of, put whatever word you want on it, disadvantage to the person who's 20 miles away. And it's attempted to quantify that and build that into the measures. That's what we're trying to do.
It has already been touched on about banned second cars and all to travel to work and things like that, but it's not only travelling to work, it's actually picking up on appointments or things, hospital appointments or whatever they are for the elderly and such like who are living in maybe in isolated areas in the rural areas. Yes. So it is going to be an issue that will obviously throw up some interesting sort of results. But, wish you well.
Okay, thank you.
Declan, quick question.
Thanks very much. Now, I think the fact that we haven't got a rural area in the top decile says it all. We know that rural areas are deprived, and the reality is, when you do these statistics and put them out there, I know you say organisations can pick and choose measures. They are going to use the MDM rank score. They are going to use it. And so if you're going to put it out there, I think it needs to be right, because realistically, under target and social need, the money is going to follow. This is going to be used as an indicator in terms of its MDM, and this has to be got right. And I think a review is very, very important. Very important.
Okay. The departments can use the proximity to service to target resources. Do you know of any departments that are doing this?
Well, we do the measures, and we have statisticians in departments that advise on methodologies. Now, I centrally, since I've been here, haven't done that work, but I intend to do it, kicking it off next Monday. Actually, we've got a meeting. I want the departments to tell us how they're using the indices, and we will have that information. As I said earlier, it's part of the user engagement side of having it being a national statistic. It just so happens that the timing is that the meeting is next Monday, and they will then feed back to us centrally how they're actually using the measures to target their policies. But I looked up the Rural Development Fund, though, because I know that you've been talking about it, and they currently use the employment domain as well as the multiple deprivation. So there is obviously some different thinking going on out there, rather than just using the multiple deprivation decile figures all of the time. I mean, that's there, it's published and it's there, and as you say, some people are just picking that up and using it and going with it. But there are so many other ways of using these measures, and I'd like to reiterate that NISRA is there to support people if they want to discuss what might best suit their policy needs.
Okay. No further questions? Well, thank you very much for your presentation. Thank you. Turn to agenda item 2, Chairperson's business. Members will recall that it was agreed that I would meet with the Chairperson of the EDI Committee, Mr McClone, to discuss a joint approach to how the two committees deal with going for growth. Mr McClone and I met yesterday and are suggesting that a joint committee meeting in the first instance, the focus of that joint committee meeting will be to consider the next progress report from Going for Growth. That report is due sometime in March or April. The two chairs will get together after the first joint committee meeting to review the situation and to consider if the approach actually worked. Both committees can, of course, continue to focus on issues in Going for Growth that are specifically relevant to their own remit. For example, this committee is likely to want to focus on the business investment scheme in Going for Growth, which crosses over to the Farm Business Improvement Scheme and Rural Development Programme. Agenda item 3, minutes of the meeting, 2nd of December 2014. Can I refer members to the draft minutes of the meeting on the 2nd of December 2014 at page 7 to 12? Are members content that the draft minutes are accurate? Yeah. Yes, so then I will sign. Agenda item 4, matters arising. Can I refer members to matters arising at pages 15 to 56? Are members content to action the matters arising as suggested in the index sheet on page 14? Okay, ma'am. Turn to agenda item 6. We have an oral briefing from DARD on public expenditure, January 2014-15 monitoring. Can I refer members to the briefing paper from the Department of pages 96 to 97?
They're coming now.
Okay. Can I welcome Graham Wilkinson, Assistant Secretary, and Roger Dye, Accountant. Can I ask you to take up to 10 minutes for your presentation, and then we'll ask some questions.
Okay, thank you, Chair and members, for the opportunity to brief the committee today on the Department's January monitoring round proposals. Hopefully you've had an opportunity to review the paper submitted, and Roger and I will be more than happy to answer any questions that you might have on the Department's monitoring round proposals. Before turning to the detail of the paper, it might be worth setting out for the committee a summary of the context for 2014-15 and also the outcome of the October monitoring round. We certainly have been aware from the start of the 14-15 financial year that it would be very constrained for all departments, and there would be both minimal allocations through each monitoring round as well as the need to implement in-year reductions. As part of our financial planning to help both fund our known pressures as well as the executive cuts to a resource budget, we have undertaken a range of cost control measures across all business areas. Chair, we're very keen to ensure that our strong financial performance over the last number of years is maintained, particularly in light of the very constrained financial outlook going forward. We want to demonstrate our ability to manage our finances effectively and to avoid underspends where possible. At this stage of the financial year, we are aware of a material overcommitment at block level, particularly on resource, of around 25 million. And given the cuts already impacting on departments, it's very unlikely that there will be any bids met in this monitoring round. Chair, I think it is important to make these comments in relation to the financial context, as the need to absorb pressures internally has been an important influence in how we are managing our financial position. You will recall at the October monitoring round that we did submit 4 resource bids, one for depreciation and one for capital funding. These bids were presented to the Executive and we were successful in securing £8 million for TB compensation, depreciation funding of 1.3 million and additional capital funding of 2.3 million. Turning to the January monitoring round itself, the exercise was commissioned by DFP back on the 17th of November, and as this is the last monitoring round of the 14-15 financial year, it's critically important as the outcome of this process will set the final budget position against which provisional outturn will be measured. Given the extremely tight timescales associated with the outcome of the January monitoring round exercise, the process has been split into 2 stages. The first stage deals with transactions which do not require executive approval and includes updates on technical issues and annually managed expenditure. Regarding technical issues, the Department has some de minimis transfers to other departments in this monitoring round totalling £0.8 million. These are mainly in relation to the TRIPSI programme and include transfers to DHSSPS and DRD totalling £0.3 million. We also have one IT capital transfer to IT Assist totalling £0.2 million. And there are some minor adjustments to our AME budget of around £0.1 million. Stage 2 of the process deals with those transactions that require executive approval and includes reduced requirements, bids, updates on ring-fenced financial transactions capital and information on any exceptional items to be processed. The Department has identified one small reduced requirement of £0.2 million for ring-fenced depreciation, and this has arisen primarily for relifing of IT assets. We have not identified any reduced requirements, bids or exceptional items to be processed in this monitoring round. Chair, our successful October monitoring round outcome provides us with additional funding in each category and a degree of certainty to take forward our financial plan for the remainder of this financial year. Consequently, we have only a few minor adjustments to report in this monitoring round. The Executive is due to discuss the block position at its meeting on the 8th of January, which will be followed by a statement by the Finance Minister to the Assembly on the 12th of January. This sets out our January monitoring proposals and we intend to submit these to DFP. And as part of the process, we are asked to seek your views when submitting our final response. That concludes my introductory comments. I'm more than happy to take any questions that you might have.
Thank you very much for the presentation. We're used to seeing compensation for the TV in your monitoring rounds. I know that the money now has for the compensation has been provided out of the 100 million from the Treasury. Are you confident that this will be sufficient to meet the requirements in regard to TV?
Yes, Chair. Certainly, we've been doing our projections, and we do think that the additional £8 million that we secured as part of the October monitoring round will meet the requirements for compensation going forward. The Department does have a detailed and accurate model for forecasting the level of TB in animals and using that information, as well as the vet's own idea of where the TB is going and projecting. We have a good handle on what the costs are going to be.
That would be down on last year, wouldn't it?
It's down slightly on last year, yes, Chair.
Okay. Any questions there? Was very quiet today. This is a reduction per down, monitor round, as we know. We expect this to be the shape of things to come? Or?
Certainly, Chair, in previous monitoring rounds, we have been bringing forward bids, and as I said in my introductory comments, the financial climate is definitely shaping, fewer bids coming forward, because we've no expectation of having bids being met, because we are aware of very significant pressures facing all departments, and engaging with our colleagues in DFP. We're very aware of how difficult the financial climate is. We've had to take significant reductions in year and trying to manage those. So. We don't expect to have bids being met going forward. So yes, I mean this would seem to be the norm going forward. And certainly in setting out our budget for 15-16, we're very mindful of that, and that's part of the reason why we have included TB compensation as part of our proposals in 15-16, because that is going to be a contractual commitment that the department will have to meet. So bringing forward bids in future monitoring rounds, we don't expect to have that met in future.
Okay. No other questions. Are members content to approve the proposals for the monitoring round as brought forward by the department? Members content? Okay, if they are. Okay, thank you very much.
Thank you.
Thank you. Important that we keep a quorum. Number of members wait for questions. So. Okay. Agenda item 7, oral briefing from Caffrey, training courses for the Young Farmers Scheme. Can I refer members to the briefing paper from the department, page 99 to 100. Can I welcome Joan Fay, Assistant Secretary, Martin McHenry, Senior Principal Officer, and Pauline Rooney, Senior Principal Officer. Can I ask you to take up to 10 minutes for your presentation, and then we'll ask you some questions.
Okay. Chairman, thank you very, very much. I hope not to take up 10 minutes in the presentation. I'll be happy enough. But first of all, can I thank yourself and the committee for the opportunity to attend today. Primarily to update you on the Caffrey current position with regard to the development and delivery of the Level 2 qualification in agriculture. I have already sent through a paper that I think covers all the main information about the reasons why we're delivering the qualification and some of the details about the application process and the uptake of it. And I know in the invitation, some of the members maybe some time ago expressed some concern about our capacity to deliver this programme, given the short notice and the timeframes, and we can talk about those. I would like to reassure you and the committee that to date the development and the delivery of the training has gone very well. The biggest challenge we faced was the number of applications that we received at the outset was considerably higher than we anticipated. We received 3,495 applications by the 31st of August, and in fact we were anticipating and planning on probably a figure under 1,000. That said, we took a number of steps to make sure the training could be delivered within the appropriate timescales, and I would like to give credit to a lot of the staff on the ground, the frontline staff who got involved in the administration of it, in the development of it, and are currently involved in the delivery of it. And I think one of the key things, Chairman, was that out of those 3,500 people, the majority of the communication was through electronic means, some 2,500, and without that, we simply could not have delivered within the timescales that we have delivered. I think we have shown that we are capable of delivering the programme to date. We're just started it. I am confident that we can complete this programme before the 15th of May to ensure that all the applicants who participate in it and pass the qualification will be eligible, and they will have their level 2 qualification by the 15th of May when they come to put in their application, should they wish to go that far as the level 2 programme is concerned. The current position, as I have outlined in the paper, is that we have established 93 training groups. We have 2,735 students enrolled, and we have 73 staff delivering the training across the country. And that's where we are, Mr. Chairman. And if you're happy enough, I'm happy enough. I'll answer any questions you have. Martin McHenry looks after the programme from Caffrey's point of view on the ground at Greenmount, and Pauline Rooney is my colleague from headquarters in Dundonald House.
Well, can I commend you for on the programme? I know it was certainly a big undertaking whenever you realised the extent and the size of the numbers that had an interest. Has there been many dropouts? I mean, I think it's 2,735 that actually went ahead.
Yes, yeah. I think in round figures, we had about 3,500 people to start with.
Yeah.
And there was a lot of speculation out around the country as to why people were applying, and that number really did surprise us. So we did talk to policy colleagues in Dundonald House, and we took a point of building into the communication with the 3,500 applicants. Look, do you know the rationale for this? Do you know the details of why you're applying for a level 2 qualification? It's linked to a young farmer scheme. The level 2 is only one element, one that would make you successful to be eligible for the young farmers element within single farm payment or within CAP reform, and the potential evidence that you might need to comply with that. So we put as much information, Chair, as we could at that time out to people before they got into the registration phase. And about 700, I think I'm right in saying, Martin, dropped out, and that brought us down from about 3,500 to around 2,800. And I think it was simply a case that a lot of people were talking the scheme up and weren't too sure of all the rules and regulations around it. So based on that, then I think we got people a better informed cadre of people, and those 2,800 people, they went ahead, they registered for the programme. It did involve them paying money over to us that we were going to pass on to the accrediting body, and once people had made that commitment, that's why we're in the position we're in now, and I think it's just over 2,700 people have registered. We still have a few people, despite a lot of attempts by us to get them registered and on the programme. We still have a few people haven't just registered yet, but that's up to them. We've given them about 4 opportunities, and we're still progressing that one.
That's down to them, of course, right? I see that some over 1,600 students are actually doing the beef course. That's quite high, really.
It is. Probably the biggest surprise across all the sectors was the large number of applicants from the beef sector.
Yeah.
The only way I could explain that, there's a large number of beef farmers are part-time. An awful lot,
yeah,
compared to, say the dairy industry, the pig industry, where they're considerably smaller numbers. And those part-time farmers, I just think they have wider opportunities to look at their holding, and obviously you're into 20-odd thousand, probably beef and sheep farmers, full-time and part-time. So yes, we were surprised with the total numbers there, but when you think of the part-time element, and I think it's also confirmed that the majority of the people of the 2,700 that we are currently training, certainly on the beef and sheep side, they're part-time as well. The people coming to the programmes are part-time, most of them part-time, I think, right, saying that, Martin? Whereas on the dairying side, we will be seeing more young people coming to that programme, but they're likely to be from full-time farms and are full-time on those farms. Whereas on the beef and sheep side, you have people who are have other jobs and farming at the same time.
Yeah.
But it's
No, I thought it was quite interesting to see that it's so high now. You know, I was surprised myself.
well, that surprised us, believe you me, when the figures came in August. It was high.
Oliver, McGowan, your question, Oliver?
Thank you. And can I congratulate you on this here, because it doesn't seem any time at all that you were here talking about it. Now we have it rolled out. I don't think people realise you could have done that in such short, turned it around in such short space of time. Well, congratulations on that there. When you talk about the percentage part-time, what percentage roughly? Are we talking over 50%, 60%, 40%?
It'd be hard just to get a percentage on the beef side, but I think it'd be well over 50%.
And the same in the sheep?
Sheep as well on that side, yeah.
That's good. And the breakdown, I suppose there's no breakdown in male, female, mostly male.
I just haven't the figure fingers at the minute, but it would be 90%, I'm sure, male to female.
And anybody who wants to go into next year,
Yeah.
that's...
But the course will be offered again at the same stage next year.
Do we have any idea of anticipated numbers for next year? Do you think it would be as high as this year?
No,
much lower.
No, I think it will be.
I think we'd all accept that
This was exceptional.
this is the first one, and it is an exceptional one. And I would like to think that we have captured the bulk of people who are interested in taking this training and are interested in get the, either the young farmers top up with a new entrance scheme. Now, yeah, you would anticipate that there would be people who have either missed the opportunity here, to get on the programme as of now, plus younger people coming along next year, and situations it does change out on farms. So, fingers crossed, it would be significantly lower than that for next year, but we would anticipate a programme being available, yes.
And do you have, does the average age say anything?
Well, just on that, the average age is 29 that is on the course, so I think we've got a substantial number of people between that 40 and under for the young farmer scheme. So the average age we thought was higher than we maybe anticipated.
Yes.
But it's 29, and that's right across all groups, Very good.
And all in all, these are happy with it. Is any downside after anything that could be improved for next time?
Certainly, the decision was taken, and we knew that we were obliged to deliver the course. It was a very tight time frame for us to develop a programme at the outset and then deliver it. We've learned an awful lot from that. I would like to think if we could move to more of an online one, it would certainly streamline the thing. It would put less pressure on the staff on the ground. And all the indications are there that the farming industry is capable of delivering on that one. So if we can streamline the administrative one, we focused the whole training programme around the 3 campuses, but we couldn't do it all. So we are using community halls, we're using FE colleges, we're using some hotels, only 2 or 3, but the majority of them, and we're well placed because we've obviously the campus at Greenmount, one in Cookstown and one in Enniskillen. If you anticipate smaller numbers, there could be a bit more travel in it next time than we've been able to do this time. It'll just depend, because we'll have to make it, and it'll depend on the budget cuts and the pressures. We want to deliver it locally, but when you get to a group that, say less than 20 people, it starts to become expensive. And if we can there's a better package around this, what we're doing here, and that is all based on around 30 people.
Okay.
No, I have to say just congratulations on what you've done. I think it's remarkable the way you've turned that round in a short space of time. Well done.
Thank you.
I know that students had a small fee to pay to enter the scheme. What's it costing, Jeffrey, overall? Have you any idea?
Yes, we have an idea, but it's not finalised yet. In a lot of the evenings, we're probably somewhere around additional to our ordinary running costs, somewhere between 250 to 300,000.
Okay.
So for nearly 3,000 applicants, in my view, it represents good value for money.
Okay. Sidney Anderson.
Thank you, Chair. Thank you for your presentation today. Just as a matter of interest, how long is the course? How many weeks? Or I haven't picked it up. How many weeks is the course?
It's a 20-week course,
20-week course.
and they're on their 8th week
Right.
now.
I note in the paragraph here it says that the attendance has been good. We haven't got the results yet available as to the attendance.
Yeah.
What do you see as the attempts? I know that you're asked about dropout and such, but how many of the 20 weeks would be sufficient to, say, complete the course, if you know what I mean? Is there a number of weeks that have to attend it?
Yeah. We have an attendance at 80%.
Has to be 80%.
80% attendance across the course, and at this minute in time we're seeing 90% plus attendance week on week. So it doesn't seem to be a difficulty for people. I suppose the other aspect of that is that the assessments take place on a weekly basis.
Okay.
So if you're missing too many weeks, you're going to be missing some assessments as well. So they're built in at the end of an evening. So if we deliver one part of a course tonight, next Tuesday night they deliver another part and then assess on this week's at the end of it. So people are having to attend to achieve those assessments. But about 80% is the start.
If there are circumstances maybe where someone can't attend for whatever reason and were to miss out on that cut-off point, can a facility be made that would pick up on that somewhere else that would still qualify them to get that qualification?
We're working at that there at the minute. I suppose the first line is to attend every night that you can, because it's quite a tight time scale. Towards the end of the programme, we will be making some assessments of getting. We're able to track all the assessments of everyone, of giving some other evenings over to that. But it is a fairly tight time scale to do it. So the encouragement is for people to do it as we go along, where they can.
If there was some of the applicants, if they were maybe falling behind and coming near the end of the course, obviously there'd be you would pick up on that and sort of give them a push on to say, look, we'll try and facilitate and get this finished, maybe them lose out on it.
We're monitoring that on a weekly basis at the minute.
Right.
That we don't get to the situation in February or March where people are 4 or 5 assessments down.
Yeah.
So we're doing that on a weekly basis. We have the spreadsheets up in terms of attendance, and we have the spreadsheets in terms of their assessment and their progress.
Good. Yeah.
We'll be talking to them before March, for their own benefit.
Keep an eye on it.
Yeah. We're monitoring.
Thank you very much, and all the best.
Yeah. I think I would say on that one that what we are finding in this, there's a phenomenal range of abilities here.
Yeah.
Because we have people going from 14 years of age to 67, I think. You have people with a strong practical farming pedigree, and people with very little. There are veterinary surgeons in the course, there are doctors in the course, there are full-time farmers, there are part-time farmers, there are waves, partnership. There are even the mix. There's a whole mix in there, and it is important, as Martin said, to do this assessment on a weekly basis. Otherwise, you could get left behind, and people who are maybe not used to some of the elements, IT and that. And unless we do that on a weekly basis, they would fall behind, and it then would come to a shock. So I see your point, that come next March, you find yourself, oh gosh, I'm not going to pass this, and I've put in 15 nights now. We will do our best in that one, but it's still a level 2 qualification, and people have to put in the effort to pass it. There. If people don't complete assignments and things like that, they will not pass. But I would be very, very disappointed if we don't have a high pass rate here for people who are aspiring to become, to educate themselves and have the skills and potentially be eligible for a young farmer's top-up.
Yes, and it's almost self-promoting. They're coming to do the course themselves, so it should mean that they're not been made to do this. It's something they want to do.
That's right. And Chairman, to be fair, and say that we started our first evaluation this week. We have an evaluation sheets out, so with just the first 250 replies back and they have been very positive from the first 250 about the course material, about assignments, about how things are working with their tutors. Those sorts of things. We're past that bit of organisation and admin. The class is there, they're going, and it's now down to what people achieve out of the thing, and that's positive. But we will be saying to people, you must keep going at that. You have to keep it going in order to get your level 2, because without it, you may have learned something, but you'll not be eligible for anything at the
That's
end.
right, wasted your time, really. Oliver, you know,
Just
Chris?
very quickly, Chair. Have we worked out the probable value of the top-ups for those who would pass? The potential money involved here,
I don't believe so, Chair. It's not my area. I wouldn't imagine so, because you have to think of it. The 2,700 odd that we're training now, they're the people out there who don't, by and large, have a level 2 qualification. We have no idea of how many people out there have got a level 2 qualification in agriculture or higher, and they're going to be added on to the training figure. In other words, are there another 2,500 out there, or is it 4,000 who may or may not be eligible?
Yeah.
So it would be impossible at this stage to work out what that top up is. Now, I think it's fair to say that the more people apply to it, the less it'll be. Would that be right, Pauline? I think that's because it's a straight 2%.
It's
I
a
think
2%, so it'll be divided among
Whoever
becomes through as eligible in the Young Farmer Scheme.
Yeah.
So there's potential, there is money out there that will be well worthwhile.
Well, it'll be the more people that come in, the less they'll get from the top.
Yeah. Okay, thank you.
Okay, I had a number of back in the early stages of the programme. I'd had to travel maybe some 50 mile, and it was probably only 3-4 mile down the way.
Yes.
There was a programme been run. Was able to iron most people out?
Yep.
We had, when we initially made contact to give people a course and a time, etc., in a group, we had 509 requests to change that. Okay. So, again, that gave us another administrative burden to deal with. So, we set out some criteria in terms of how we would assess these. And that started from people who maybe had SENDO requirements, so special educational needs, and who were maybe travelling with another member of the family or whatever. Others who had family commitments, people who potentially had work commitments. And we went down the list just on a priority basis. Others who may have said, look, I would like to get one closer to home, but the night suits me. So we were working our way down that. To be fair, out of the 509, we accommodated 2/3 of them.
That's very good.
Okay. And where we were getting into the stage was that 1 in every 2 that we were starting into contact were actually saying, oh, well, no, a couple of weeks is over, I'm travelling with so-and-so and I'm quite happy now. The group's good, okay. So we actually replied to all 509 to say we had accommodated your request or we weren't able to accommodate it. And we have had none come back from that again. So as much as we could, there's potentially people out there may still say if maybe 10 mile from home would be better than if to go 20 mile, but by and large we've tried to be as favourable as we could and treat everybody as well as we could. It's just that those requests were down below someone who maybe had a work commitment that night, or a family or the wife was out, or vice versa or whatever. So we tried to go through those as quick as we could, and we're now in a situation where each of the groups are at different stages in their learning. So not all groups are doing the same every night because of an IT component, and that's one of the factors in terms of getting IT accommodation, that we've had to build that IT bit to use the facilities in the campuses. So it's very difficult now to make any changes because they're in different programmes.
No, well, that's good that you have managed to.
Yeah.
But we did as far as we could.
And believe it or not, I had a few phone calls, but they did. We went back to them and told them that you were looking at it, and they didn't come back to me, so they must have been settled anyway.
Okay.
No, I think it's good that there's a good number showing, even part-time young people as part-time farmers, showing an interest in the future. And and doing the programme. Thank you very much again for your presentation. If there's any other questions, thank you.
Okay. Thank you, Chairman. Thank you. Thank you.
Just give them. Yeah, and take away. Waiting for the next crowd to come through.
Okay, yeah.
Chair, that's a big success, that.
Yeah, we've managed very well. Yeah.
You know, I think it might do any harm if we wrote a letter to the Minister and let her know that. You know?
We can raise it later. We can't make any decision now. We've no forum for making decision, but we can raise it later. I'll put it down here to be raised.
Hopefully.
Virtual.
We can write to Caffrey.
Try and get a few back over here.
Yeah.
4 of us.
But just you are just coming through now, so just waiting for them to come in. They're early. They weren't due on to 3:30, so. Yeah.
Oh yeah, yeah. Good.
Do you want us to take a 5-minute break?
Yeah, I think maybe we should take a
Don't-
5-minute break.
Don't go out the door.
30.
We have an oral briefing now from the UFU, from the Northern Dairy Industry. Can I refer members to the briefing paper from the UFU at pages 105 to 110 and an explanation provided by the Department on the EU export refunds and intervention at pages 111. Can I welcome Mark Lee Bell, Deputy President, Jonathan Moore, Dairy Chairperson, William Irvine, Dairy Vice Chairperson, and Chris Osborne as Senior Political Policy Officer. Can I declare an interest myself and a member of the Ulster Farm Union and a member of the Dairy Committee before we start? So, Bartley, we'll give you up to 10 minutes to make your presentation and then we'll ask some questions. And we apologise, there's a number of members in the chamber at the minute, this question time. And it's coming near recess and there's a number of problems. Okay?
Thank you very much, Chairman, giving us this opportunity. And as you say, you're a dairy farmer yourself, William, and you know all the pain that you're going through at the minute. You know the background to the dairy industry in Northern Ireland, probably the second largest sector, second largest milk producing region in the UK, 3,500 dairy farms, a market value of 627 million. So we're talking here a major player in the agri-industry in Northern Ireland, and it's with this in mind that in the continuing decline in dairy prices that I think we do need to take this seriously, and probably at this point I will hand over here to Chris Osborne, Senior Policy Officer, Dairy Policy Officer at Union Headquarters, and Chris will maybe go through a wee bit of the key data and we'll follow on from that then.
Thank you, Barclay. Thank you. The situation is, to be honest with you, pretty bleak in terms of what we're actually looking at. Prices rose significantly this time last year on the basis of what was actually quite a sustained period of export moves by Northern Ireland, in particular into China. And just to sort of give you a comparison, China imports of whole milk powder, which is our major export out of Northern Ireland in terms of dairy product, is actually down 72%. And that's had an impact, amongst other things, on price. Farmgate price last recorded by DARD for October was 25.09p. And that was down from the peak this time last year of just under 35. And whenever that falls at such a very quick period of time, it has a significant impact upon farm cash flows. The reason why the Chinese have stopped buying as much whole milk powder, it was down to their monetary policy. The monetary policy had realised that inflation was going to be a significant problem, so they stopped the import of foreign product from countries such as ourselves. We have the added problem as well with what happens with increased milk prices is increased production. Milk production in Northern Ireland is up 11% this year. Added to that, New Zealand, which would be the major milk producing country of the world, their production is also up 11%. But to give you an idea, April this year, milk in Northern Ireland was up nearly 14.5% year on year for April 2014. We at the Ulster Farmers Union run what was known as the milk price indicator. We still run this. We have seen this coming, unfortunately, but not quite the level as what is actually fallen. That would be partly attributable to there's what we call the perfect storm, which was exacerbated by the ban on dairy products by the Russians from the EU. As a result of what happened in Russia, private storage aid was introduced. A large amount of butter was taken off the market and put into temporary storage. 20,500 tonnes is the current figure, and that has actually had a stabilising effect upon commodity butter prices. In terms of the actual outlook, I have done some figures here from the Eurex futures market. And what we're actually saying is the figures are not showing a steady recovery until at least the early spring. Weakness carrying on to the new year. And even then, whenever prices do recover, they're not going to recover to anywhere near what they were this time last year. I'd like to hand over to Barclay at this stage to say what we're actually looking at in terms of taking this forward. But just before I go, just before I finish, what we're looking at is if we have a sustained period of low prices, as to what at the moment is currently pressure on cash flows, it will be unsustainable for many dairy farms going into at least beyond the middle of next year.
Okay, well, certainly we have a few points in mind that we think could help in this period of price volatility, and certainly the first thing we'd be looking at is that we are calling for the intervention threshold to be raised. Currently, intervention price sitting at 20.6 cents per litre, which I think works out possibly about 14p. Now, it's not hard to do the sums there. This is a figure which is far, far too low, and would be of no benefit at all to the sector unless there was a political will there to get this intervention price raised. So certainly, if we could achieve that, it's not a quick fix. I think this takes time, but at least it's something certainly we feel that needs to be highlighted. As I say, there needs to be a political will to get this, and it would certainly give farmers possibly a bit of a fighting chance if they saw that there was a will there, and that maybe within time that this could be raised. So that was one of the issues. Yep.
Sorry, just to interrupt as well. The UFU are very much of the opinion that even by calling for a review of the threshold level will send the necessary positives and much needed signals to the market that could actually put a possible floor, not just a floor on the market, but maybe give a little bit of a boost to demand as to what these market tools actually do offer. So if we're in the sort of talking between these four walls, the likelihood of this ever actually getting off the ground with agreement to actually get it changed, we could maybe sort of take a step back and say that the review itself, to agree to look at it, the agreement to look at it, would give positive market signals.
Okay. A few other things which we have also discussed would be the averaging, the averaging for income tax from 2 to 5 years, and I think in calling for this. I suppose we are keeping in line with the Republic of Ireland here. Also, you know, I think we are meeting with the main banks next week, and we would be calling for capital holidays on long-term business loans. We would see that as some sort of an assurance from our main financial institutions that they are going to stand by the farmers in these periods of volatility. Volatility is a word, I think, that has come into all our vocabularies over the past year or two, and certainly we know a lot more about it in the past year or two, and it looks as if going forward it's going to be the same. There are other things as well, I suppose, that have been looked at. Something that operates in Australia, and I think you do have a paper on it, called the Farm Management Deposit Scheme. Another, which has been mentioned by some of the processors, I suppose, is fixed price contracts. But all these tools are going to be needed, probably, to try and get the dairy sector through this very, very difficult time. And certainly it's going to be a combination of these to see it through.
Okay.
William or Jonathan?
I think going forward, a thing we've also seen, which doesn't seem to be working as well as it should, is the interaction between our Assembly here, Westminster, and perhaps Europe. Like, it seems to be that we need, whether we get the UK regional farm ministers together with the Westminster minister, and see that whenever votes have been taken within Europe, for example, though Westminster leads in this here, that they should be aware of the regional requirements, that they're not voting from their own sort of selfish interest and take into the rest of us. And perhaps locally it would be beneficial if we could have a meeting between the Assembly here, the MEPs and some of the MPs, to see that when we're things like the EFRA committee in Westminster, if it's meeting and relevant to us, that we are aware that it's on, and that the relevant information is fed in from both the likes of ourselves, the industry, and here.
Okay. Can I say to the members and to yourselves, last week we had a briefing from Dairy UK, oh, you're aware, or maybe not, and at the conclusion of that meeting there was a decision made to write to our own minister to impress with her the urgency to initiate talks with DEFRA. We have written to the DEFRA minister. We also written to the EU commissioner. We have written to all our MEPs and our MPs, and we also wrote a letter to our local banks. So we have been, as a committee, proactive in regard to those issues. Okay. If you were saying, I'm just letting you know what we have actually done as a committee. So if I was saying to you now, what do you feel this committee can further do to help the situation in regard to our own minister? You didn't say that. I know where you're coming from in regard to meeting with MPs and MEPs, and I think there's been a number of meetings with industry and our MEPs. Is there much more do you feel we can do than we've already done here as a committee, for instance, in regard to?
I think it may be very much collectively what Jonathan here, chairman of our milk committee, was saying. I mean, this needs to be a collective approach, and
a combined approach.
Yeah, combined approach. Everybody has to realise the gravity of the situation, and you know, I think that would be very useful if we could see that sort of effort being made.
Okay. As you're all aware, I'm a dairy farmer myself, where I fully understand the gravity of the situation and the concerns that are out there. As a committee, we want to do all we can, play our role to help. Certainly. Edwin, you have a question?
Yeah, clearly we're at break even, and the whole anticipation will be to actually significant losses on milk for a period of time. And the only real means of actually reducing the impact of those losses would be to raise the intervention floor from what it currently exists at. And I think that there's a reasonable case can be made for that, particularly as the last time intervention was used, the EU profited some €800 million. What do you wish to see in terms of leadership in actually delivering this? Obviously, we have our own minister, there's a UK minister, we'll have an Irish commissioner in agriculture in Europe, which should be to our advantage. So, what steps would the UFU be advocating in terms of actually getting the message to Europe that the floor is just too low? We need to have a higher threshold and thus, reduce the actual pain that is going to inevitably be felt by the dairy sector.
I think what we need is pressure on the Secretary of State at the EFRA Committee to get an understanding of the severity of the problem, because when we met with Liz Truss 3 weeks ago, her attitude was very much, well, the market's going to sort itself out. But if we leave the market to sort itself out, there's going to be a lot of casualties out there. And we did actually, correspondent in England actually did use the word bloodbath as far as the dairy industry is concerned. And the Westminster government does, in particular, that the Secretary of State has an attitude that it's a laissez-faire attitude as far as market intervention is concerned, because with the PSA was extended by 3 months last week, the UK government abstained. So I think that there needs to be pressure from yourselves through the relevant route to stress the severity of the problem to Liz Truss.
I think it's not also it's not understood in on the GB mainland just how far different our market is, or where our milk's processed into theirs. They're a very large liquid milk market, whereas we're very exposed to the world markets. So they will get price cuts, but much slower than what we get them. Because of our exposure to the world market, we're getting them earlier and deeper.
Yeah.
No, they have. We need the message of what our industry is like and getting across, because they're looking at it from an entirely different point of view.
Yeah. Raw milk doesn't travel as well as cheese or powdered milk or whatever, so it's obvious that they will take less pain than what we're taking. Okay.
Okay. There seems to be an issue that the Irish Republic don't seem to be, because of super levy, because of different issues down there, they don't seem to be at one with us this time around. All right? Seems to be the case that we're told. They don't. Normally we're an ally in this situation. In this situation, they were normally in the same, singing up the same hymn sheet as ourselves, but this time it looks that they're holding back because of super levy.
I think, Mr. Chairman, come the springtime when they're hard jobs, they will be feeling the pain every bit as much
I would have thought
as
so.
the rest of us now. So they're just in a wee holiday period at the minute, but it will come.
Yeah. But at the same time, myself and William actually attended the IFA Dairy Conference at the end of October, and the message that came out of there was, do not expand unless you can afford it, which was a complete contrast to what was coming out of Harvest 2020 maybe 2 years ago. So there is a feeling on the ground there that things aren't great.
Yeah. Okay. In relation to Dairy UK, which was this last weekend, they had said there's other issues. For instance, the EUC, there's trade agreements between Canada and USA that have been again looked at. Is this another threat to us, or is there opportunities in that? You know? Trade agreements with Canada and the USA.
Depends which direction it goes.
Yeah. Well, I mean, EU trade agreements, there could be dangers in that, I thought, you know.
Well, the attitude very much was that up until, again, maybe 6 months ago, my dairy farmers here can probably keep me right on this, there was that the US market was opening for export for the first time in its history, well, its recent history, but that has even sort of taken a bit of a change over the last couple of months with regards to, there's been a significant fall in the US cheese price. Okay. So, I would say that, and also William and Jonathan both are just back from a trade mission tour, or not trade mission, a study tour to the US. They would sort of be able to give you a good idea about what the feeling on the ground is there in relation to trade.
They are, to be typical American, they're very bullish about opening markets. They're talking now, be modest growth, but modest growth over the scale of America is more milk than Northern Ireland, like so. But they're talking 2%, and that virtually all going on to the export market. And they would like access to the Canadian market as well, because the Canadian population is close to the border, and they see that as a new, and it's heavily regulated north of the border, and they think they should access it. So,
okay. Sidney Anderson.
Thank you, Chair, and thank you for your presentation. We touched on the intervention levels. I think of you, maybe, partly. Talk about it maybe down as low as 14, and the present price is 14 or 15 pence for that level. What would be the level of intervention you would like to see, or would be a great help here? Would it be 20 pence, or would you want it right down to that? You tell us that maybe that if this situation was to continue, the present situation was to continue, you could see by next year, in the middle of next year, a grave situation developing here, where many farmers maybe would basically go to the wall. Is that what you're telling us?
Well, I suppose the dairy industry probably, they have invested heavily in their businesses, and probably realistically, I think, intervention price would need to be up in the low 20s to be of any significant use to our dairy industry here. So there's quite a jump to be made there, but that's the real facts. And I mean, all the experts are saying that there will be no significant change until well into maybe Q3 and maybe even Q4 of next year. So
it's this time next year.
So it's a long time for farmers to try and dairy farmers to have to try and see this one out.
Mr. Chairman, just on the intervention level, the current rate is in place now for about 10 or 11 years. When it was set, it was in the general ballpark of production costs. We're now a good 10 pence behind average production costs in Northern Ireland with the current intervention level.
Has nothing been done over those 10 years to compensate for what you're saying for those years? No. But what you're saying now is it's time to speak to like a Liz Truss and these people. That's what you're looking for, that more some effort be made through.
Will we feel moving forward into the post-quota, we do need some bit of a safety net? The current level isn't really, we're already in too much trouble when we reach it.
It's worth emphasising as well that, just to make it very, very clear, that this is not the first time the UFU have said this, because during the CAP reform negotiations, I had made representations on the fact that the rising cost of production had to be reflected in the increased threshold levels for intervention. So I've been on record that was done through both our own department here, and also DEFRA, and also the European Union. So,
what was the response when you say that? That's from Pamela here. Over the years, as I knew went onto the committee, what was the response coming back in those times when you were saying that level would need to be up?
Not a chance. It was that blunt. Suddenly it was that blunt. Not a chance. Again, they were wanting to make us take a step away from maybe more sort of interventional approaches to markets.
So that, as you said, the response coming back, was it from this trust, was it when the market started itself out? Is that what you're saying? And that seems to be the trend at the minute.
It seems to be the driver at the minute.
But what you're telling us today is, if it continues, it could go into Q4 even next year.
It's worthwhile actually mentioning as well that Suggers in the south actually did their price projections for 2015, and they're expecting their average price to be between 25 and 27 euro cents a litre for all of next year. So very quick conversion in your head, that's very low 20s, even possibly 20p a litre. That's not good.
Well, really, what you're telling me then here today in the committee today is that you're not getting the response from the Liz Truss in the sense that there is some way to put the case forward for rising of that threshold. That's the only way you see that could sort this problem out at the present time.
I think it certainly would leave a safety net there. It's not the complete answer, but certainly it would be a somewhat of a safety net. But we need to see a bigger effort go into that approach.
As time goes on, if that didn't happen, the end of quarter 1, quarter 2 of next year, where do you think, what would you be saying to us at that stage? Would you be coming back here and saying the situation of the dairy industry is critical, or is just not viable? Or what would we be saying at that stage?
Well, I'm not a dairy farmer myself, but I can either hand
And
over
always ask the chair this one when you go.
I can either hand over to Jonathan or William here, and as dairy farmers, certainly I'm sure
I
they
think
could.
the problem, Chairman, is that if you had a bad price for a month or two, is one thing, but if you get a sustained, if you're making losses over a sustained period of time, and in general, a lot of dairy farms will have money borrowed at some level, and the banks will tell you they tend to have the most of the money borrowed. Like that. You've the cost to produce a litre of milk, and then you've costs like your bank charges, repayments, things like that there on top of that there. So the longer that goes on, there's a limit to how long people can stand not making money, and the longer it goes on, the bigger the crisis will be. It's the short answer. So if you're talking late into next year, certain people already will be in a lot of pain as it is. After another month, there'll be more in that group, and after another month, there'll be even more in that group. It just does expand out. It's not as if there were some people doing all right the whole time. It
certainly doesn't, what you're telling us today and what we're hearing is that it doesn't paint a pretty picture, and certainly as time goes on, you can't see things improving really over the next 12 months. That's what we're being told today. Unless there's... What would happen if we had a bad winter? Like, where would it be then?
That really, we have a perfect storm at the minute, so I don't know what you call the storm after that, but that certainly would put tremendous pressure. I mean, if the winter ran on to into April or nearly May Day, that's going to present further pain, further big challenges.
Well, a double-edged sword, because if there was to be a freak weather occurrence in Oceania, in Australia or New Zealand, that basically cuts the production in those areas, it could have a possible positive impact upon price. It's another way to think about it, because I did remember one analyst said the only thing that's going to stop the milk price falling further would be either like another drought in New Zealand, northern New Zealand, Australia. So it's a bit of a double-edged sword, that one.
I think, Chairman, that is the problem at the minute. Usually, or the past number of years, there's been a weather occurrence, be it drought or flood or whatever, somewhere. It's always restricted production in some part of or some one of the major exporting regions, and this year that hasn't occurred anywhere. So when they talk about perfect storm, it's because the weather's been good everywhere.
Okay. Thank you very much. Ian?
Yeah, thank you, Chair. And sorry I missed the presentation. And you're painting a very bleak picture. Could I say that, you're talking there in the terms of weather and Australia, and that you're really asking for a miracle or looking for a miracle here, and sometimes these miracles come about and sometimes they don't. But what support is DEFRA, if any, given to the milk producers? And also there, why would the Westminster government there not support?
I think the answer, I did actually explain it before you arrived, was no, and it was down to the fact that it's their attitude towards any form of market intervention, regardless of the sector, in the sense that Conservative governments are traditionally laissez-faire in terms of their approach to economics, and this has been seen here as well. Right. They do not support intervention of any shape or form in relation to market pressures. And that's traditionally been the way with the agricultural markets.
So at this late stage there, what can be done, if anything?
Somebody can call for a review of the threshold levels for intervention.
And who may do that?
Our minister can do it with representations to the DEFRA minister.
I think it gets back to the point again about a collective approach. Yeah. And that everybody's going in there fighting the one cause. Yeah.
Can I make a point as well, just in response to the first thing you said about support from DEFRA? We met with the DARD minister 2 weeks ago, and we did make the point that DARD dairy policy at the moment have not said a single word about what's happening at the moment on the ground. So we would be calling for this committee, the UFU would be calling from this committee for I dare to say, a more proactive approach from DARD dairy policy in terms of what can be done to tackle what's currently, what is awaiting us, or what many people are actually experiencing at the moment.
Thanks, Chair.
Edwin Poots.
Yeah. I think that New Zealand is one of the big problems here because their volume increased quite dramatically. I think some of you say our volume had increased by around 15% as well.
Well, for 1 month, it's been 11% for 2014 to date.
11% of the increase. How quickly can that volume be switched down again? Obviously, it's been ramped up, and a lot of new heifers have come in and all of that. And farmers will be culling more quickly and perhaps going down from 3 to 2 to dairy milking and feeding less concentrates and so forth. But how can you envisage that volume? There's not much point in producing milk at a loss, so it's bound to ramp down quite quickly again.
There's actually, I don't sort of sit on my day-to-day job trying to find all the negatives in the industry. I do actually try and find positives because we do need it in terms of there's a lot of people's livelihoods are relying upon this, and perception's very important in my job. And I think that you must remember as well that these increases have come back from milk prices. Sorry, the milk production fell quite significantly in March, April, May 2013. So the increases that we're actually seeing this year on the back of quite significant falls, which came in that horrific late winter, spring that we had with the snow. So there's a little bit of a, it wouldn't take an awful lot for a production in production to maybe give a little bit of a positivity to price.
And what negotiations as a union have you been having with the millers? Because there's been extensive falls in the price of grains, and one of the main sources of protein is soya, and the world price of soya and the price that farmers are getting in America is certainly not being reflected in terms of what farmers are paying for grain here in Northern Ireland. So what discussions are being had to, well, it is largely the biggest bill that a dairy farmer will have. What's being done to reduce the price of grain?
Well, I suppose there haven't been any discussions with them just very recently, but I think overall we would probably still see that the person probably who needs to be most sympathetic in this case are the banks, and if we can see some sort of let's say whether it's a capital holiday, whatever sort of an arrangement possibly that they might consider, I think that would be probably the greatest. Bearing, I suppose the millers maybe are only getting over 2013 and the late spring and the amount of feedstuffs that was used that year. And as I say, I think the people who can really maybe help the industry out here are the banks, and that meeting with the banks is now happening next week in Dundonald House. So hopefully we may well see some sort of action or results coming out of that.
I suppose where I'm coming from is that we've been told that it takes around 25p a litre to produce milk, and if you're going to be looking at somewhere around 20 pence, hopefully more than 20 pence, but possibly less, the more that you can do to drive the production costs downwards, the less the loss that will be incurred by the farmers in the interim. And strikes me, meal, fertiliser are two of the big bills, energy and fuel, and all of the indicators are that those have, at a global level, have reduced very significantly. But I don't think that all of that has been fed through to the industry. And given the precarious position the industry is in, we really need to be pressing very heavily that those costs come down and therefore reduce the cost of producing.
I suppose maybe even within the past few weeks we have seen grain prices actually, they have risen a bit again, so maybe not substantially, but they have edged up. But I mean, dairy farmers either side of me, might comment more.
The fall was never fully reflected in the market, and I think there's some of the millers are trying to push prices up again.
But I mean, I suppose a lot of dairy farmers maybe see it as a situation that they need to push more milk out through the gate when prices start to fall to maintain the same level of milk check coming in each month.
We're caught to a certain extent with the modern Holstein cow. You can't not feed that cow because the ongoing effects on fertility and our general health and all the rest, you destroy it for all time almost.
Yeah, it's a very difficult thing to reduce. Reduce the feeding. I think meal prices have come back about somewhere around 25, 28 pounds a tonne recently. But like you say, there is further scope probably in the marketplace.
Edwin?
Thank you.
Yeah. No, one interesting factor that came across last week in the 2009 Europe brought into intervention, and whenever they sold that onto the market again, they made something in the region of 800 million. So, I mean, one would have thought that Europe would be looking more positively. It was a good outcome for them the last time, and for the farmer, for everyone. Joanne Dobson.
Thank you, Chair. Can I apologise for missing your briefing? It was in question time, so some of my questions may already have been touched on or covered. I have met with both dairy farmers and processors in recent weeks and days, and as you say in your briefing, the forecast is very, very poor out there. And I personally and no other members of this committee are very worried about attempted suicides and people trying to earn a living but feel they're at rock bottom, they're stretched to breaking point, and that's a great concern for us because they're looking sort of for guidance on where to go next. Chris, you've been critical of DARD's handling, and a note in your briefing as having DARD policy has no foresight or support, as you say. What should DARD do now to help your members? Because, as you say, they're having to tough it out. What would you like to see them do?
I think something, Joanne, as elementary as acknowledging the fact that there's going to be challenging times ahead, because there hasn't been one word out of DARD dairy policy on this.
That's been pretty definite.
Yep. I think just even sort of a recognition that there's going to be testing times ahead.
That's the first step.
Yep. And we can sort of progress it from there.
And what are you asking your members to do at present, especially for many that receive their single farm payment is arriving in their bank account? So what would you advise them to do? What's been the advice from yourselves?
A single farm payment will get them over a few months, Joanne. I mean, it'll keep
see them over the Christmas period.
It'll keep the thing going. but longer term, as far as practical dairy farmers go,
I think it's ultimately the union's place to give business advice to any individual. So basically the advice is, if you think you have dairy advisors for the department and you have farm consultants and that, and if you think that they could come in and give you advice that would cut costs and enable you to get it better, that's the way to do it. But like, as for us, it's not place really to give business advice.
See, I think we should probably sort of differentiate what we talk about, our dairy policy and the dairy advisors on the ground.
Yeah.
That's completely separate. I'm talking about in Donald House here. I'm not talking about Caffrey or Greenmount.
I know
specific,
that, yeah,
yes.
yeah. The farmers out there don't know what to turn, and they see, as you say, the silence is deafening. They don't know where to go next. And we did hear last week the advice forthcoming was banks or intervention. That's pretty. Pretty dim. I've been hearing as well some evidence that some processors are withholding or delaying payments to dairy farmers. I've been told. So obviously this could have serious implications for the farm and household incomes. So have you heard any of this from your members?
No.
No. Okay. Happy to furnish you with some details if that helps.
I think it's safe to assume, Joanne, that we'll probably hear about it on Thursday at the Winter Fair.
Okay.
That's when we would sort of get quite a lot of sort of grassroots feedback, and we take that as a
It's
as
quite
a warning
alarming
sign.
to hear
Yes,
that.
It's a
It is,
warning
yes.
sign, yes, thank you.
Okay, and you talk about improving communication between processors and farmers. What have you done to implement this, or what changes do you feel are necessary now?
We're meeting all the major processors who are going to be at the Winter Fair. We're going to meet them and just see how they how they're interacting with their membership in terms of, well, sort of any anticipation of price falls, etc., and just sort of get them ready for what could be trying times ahead.
Those set up meetings
Supportive.
at the Winter Fair
Yes.
aside, yeah. Maybe it would be useful, Chair, to come back with that information after the Winter Fair to the committee.
Certainly.
Also, I think a suggestion has arisen where we have a number of processors actually making a loss to try and hold prices up too so far. So, I mean, processors are so far playing their part to a fair degree. And I think you would accept that, would you?
Absolutely.
I think all processors will try their best to support their members.
I don't think there's anybody within the industry happy with where the price is. Like,
Don't think processors are happy with
No,
prices
that's what I mean.
there.
Processors are in a difficult position too.
To go back to the earlier point, now, in fairness, a lot of the processors do have, like farm liaison officers, and do have information that they pass back to their suppliers and that, but it's just to make sure that they are, wherever possible, communicating as well as they can with the supplier, that everybody knows where they're going.
But as Chris said, you're expecting to hear that at the Winter Fair on Saturday. Okay, thanks, Chair.
Oliver McMullen.
Chair, thank you, and thanks for your presentation. Last week's presentation was much the same as today's, and the Tory government's yearn to leave Europe, I believe, has quite a lot to do with this. And what way you dress it up, I think that's part of the problem, because DEFRA does have a big attendance at the table in Europe. And if they, obviously, yes, we can get the Minister here to speak out, but if DEFRA is not supporting the Minister in Europe, then we're in trouble. And I think the problem lies with the Tory government. If they want out of Europe and they're not supporting yourselves, because 85% of our market is exported, which is different than themselves, I think that's where the problem is. We can try and work with the banks here and the suppliers here, and I would say they'll all do their best to work with you. But the problem lies with the Tory government and their yearn to leave Europe, and I think we're suffering from that. And we're not getting support in Europe that we can get and should be getting. In fact, they said here last week that their support to the industry here was less than courteous. And when you hear that coming from people like yourself in the cold face, I think that's very worrying. We need to be getting DEFRA to step up to the plate in Europe, and that's where you talk about your intervention, you talk about everything else. That's where everything comes from.
I think possibly even in some of this morning's press, I mean, even I don't honestly think we're getting. There's not maybe the support there should be in the Republic either.
Yeah.
Minister Coveney has expressed some doubts about the whole thing,
Yeah.
and I think if we could get a political will throughout Europe to come in behind us,
Yeah.
I think we'll be going places. But as it stands at the minute, there just doesn't seem to be that political will to drive this one forward.
And as it currently stands, we have, as the devolved nature of our establishment says, we have a Department of Agriculture that should be putting this representation into DEFRA themselves.
Mm-hmm.
And without that sort of level of support, then we don't have any chance of sort of stepping up to the mark.
Mm-hmm. Well, that can be done. But if we don't have DEFRA, who's got practically 10 seats at the table, if they're ignoring you, never mind what the South is doing, but if DEFRA's ignoring you at Europe, we're in big trouble.
Yeah, that goes back to the earlier point about we need a strong, united front from our MPs, MLAs and MEPs to make sure our voice is heard.
I would say
At all levels.
I would say our European, our MEPs in Europe are collectively behind you on this one. I would certainly, and our MLAs here will be collectively behind you as well. I don't think there's any doubt in that, and I think you'll get that support all right. But we can talk to the Minister on that for you.
Okay.
Okay.
Thanks,
Can
John.
Can I thank you very much again for your presentation? The committee is fully aware of the situation and will be doing all we can to help and to forward your concerns on. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Chairman.
So I'm going to have another call. Another what? Another third call for
Is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30. This is the Northern...
Early on, because we hadn't a quorum at the stage, can I refer members to the draft press relief at pages 101 to 103. Are members content with the press release to issue? Yeah, members?
On the Caffrey Young Farmers Scheme.
Okay. Okay.
Okay.
Right, can we go on to agenda item 9? Is that right?
Okay, yes.
Agenda item 9. For written briefing from DARD, the Public Bodies Abolition of the Advisory Committee on Pesticides. Can I refer members to the papers from the Department at page 113 to 136? Can I advise members that the purpose of the written brief is to advise the committee that the Advisory Committee on Pesticides, SCP, and the SCP-NI will be abolished as part of the Government's Public Body Reform Programme. When the SCPs are abolished, they will be reconstituted as a single expert committee of DEFRA. The members and functions of the committee will remain the same. The proposal is not anticipated to have a material impact on Northern Ireland and is regarded as a routine matter. Can I advise members that there will be a short presentation on the issue on the 13th of January, followed by a short debate in the plenary. Members are content to note for now. Okay. Agenda item 10, SL1, the Nitrous Action Programme Regulations NI 2014. Can refer members to the memo from the clerk at pages 138 to 141 and papers from the department at pages 142 to 223. Can I advise members that following the presentation to the committee on the 4th and 18th of November 2014, the department has confirmed that it has secured EU Commission agreement for its proposed action programme for the next 4 years, with this application to renew the derogation going for formal vote on the 11th of December 2014. The SR is jointly proposed by DARD and DOE and is anticipated to come to operation on the 1st of January 2015. Can I take comments from members? I think that's good to see that got a derogation agreed again from Europe. So I had always concerns because there's been a number of derogations had to be renewed. So obviously Europe is accepting that. Are members content with the merits of the policy? Okay. Agenda item 11, SR 2014-283, the Dogs Licensing and Identification Amendment Regulations NI 2014. Can I refer members to the memo from the clerk at page 225 to 226 and papers from the department at pages 227 to 231. Can I advise members that the regulations last came to the committee at the meeting on the 4th of November At that stage, no issues were identified with the policy. The regulations will abolish the need for coloured licence tags, leaving compulsory microchipping as the sole method of identification. The review of the dog licence fee will be deferred to after 2015, and the new local government, when the new local government structures should be in place. Can I seek comments from members? If you're content, can I put the question? Okay. That the Committee for Agriculture and Rural Development has considered SR 2014-283, the Dogs Licensing and Identification Amendment Regulations, NI 2014, as of no objections to the rule. Okay. Agenda item 12, SR 2014-291, the CAP Direct Payments and Support Schemes Cross-Compliance Regulations, NI 2014. And I refer members to the memo from the clerk at pages 233 and 234, and papers from the department at pages 235 to 248. Can I advise members that the regulations last came before the committee on 18th of November 2014, and although concerns were expressed at the time, the committee agreed that the policy should move to the next legislative stage. Officials explained at the meeting that any delay would have an adverse effect on the delivery of the single farm payments. The committee agreed that the concerns raised should be addressed in 2015, and an oral evidence session has been scheduled for the 27th of January 2015. And I seek comments from members. Members fully understand that? Okay. If content, I'm going to put the question that the Committee for Agriculture and Rural Development has considered SR 2014-291, the Common Agricultural Policy Direct Payments and Support Schemes, Cross-Compliance Regulations, NI 2014, and subject to comments from the Examiner of Statutory Rules, has no objections to the rule. Great. Okay. Agenda item 13, correspondence. Can I refer members to the correspondence received at pages 252 to 309. For members content the action correspondence as suggested in the index sheet at pages 250 and 251. Okay. Agenda item 14, forward work programme. No, not yet. Can I refer members to the request that the OMA Forum for Rural Associations to brief the committee at page 311 on the draft forward work programme at pages 312 and 319. Members content to hear from OMA Forum at our first meeting back in January?
Not really, Mr. Chair. I've had a long series of meetings on this issue and been pretty well briefed. And I think you start, where do we stop? We're going to bring every community group in to talk about rural poverty. We've got a very, very strong feel for what the issues are at this point. So, frankly, I think it's very good for the Minister, and having some experience in these matters, that we will be spending all of our time on these issues. But we're going into a winter here where we're looking at one area of farming which is facing very severe losses. In the pig sector, you're looking at farmers who are down £30 or more a head on pigs. And with a whole series of areas where people are facing very real challenges, which are very immediate, and things that we need to be getting our heads around and challenging the department. We heard today, for example, that the dairy sector in Dard hasn't made any comment, hasn't produced a paper, hasn't done anything on the issue. So I think we need to be talking about the issues at hand if this committee is to be relevant out to the public, and I think that a written submission from the OMA folk would suffice at this point.
Yeah. Chair, I think that the organisation covers a wider area than just OMA. It's like a large umbrella organisation. I would be content for them to come on.
I would understand that. It's from Mr. McAleer's constituency, so I would expect that if it's some group from Hillsborough or Moore or something, I'd probably be very content for them to come along too.
Most of them have been saying the same thing, probably, in recent times, and I don't understand where.
What are we proposing then?
You've said
proposing to get a written brief instead of an oral brief. That's, I think, the proposal. Is that right? Yes. The proposal is a written brief instead of an oral brief.
Is that for everybody?
No, there's been a precedent set, hasn't there? The amount of people that we've had in, and how can you deny then somebody else, if you like? It shouldn't have been started at the start.
No, but we have, we've done a course of work really on this, and what I'm saying, for the end of the session should draw to a conclusion. If there's some people want to put in written responses, that's grand, but we'll consider those. But we'll start into a new session with a whole series
Okay.
of requests for oral sessions, then
No, you're going to do that there.
Spring.
Would you not be far better putting a closing date? And then
Okay.
anybody that wants to put a written submission in and have your closing date.
Well, it was meant to be today,
Yeah.
but, this is the stakeholder event. The committee made the decision way back at the beginning that because they couldn't physically take evidence from all the community groups, I think there was nearly over 500 community-based organisations involved in TRIPSA, that they would hear from the main headline organisations and then the stakeholder group at the stakeholder event in Greenmount. Now,
We've done that all, yeah.
That was done. So I don't know whether you want to get a written submission or to hear from them.
This was the closing date today.
Yeah, but it was meant to finish today. We're bringing a review. We're bringing a paper with you to the first meeting in January. We're bringing a
So if you open it up
issues
again,
paper for you.
it opens up for everyone again.
You would have to then, if other organisations started contacting you, you'd maybe be having to facilitate them. Where the stakeholder group, the stakeholder event at Greenmount was meant to facilitate.
All those people. I think in fairness, it's got a very wide hearing. So members have to make a decision now.
Very different if they, so.
I propose that would consider a written submission from the group, given
We're seconds for that.
I've made a request.
Maybe the chair and deputy chair could meet with them.
As I was going to suggest, perhaps an informal meeting, if not.
I'll get you out of it.
Better man.
So a written submission and an informal meeting then with the chair and deputy chair and whoever else wants to attend?
Yep.
I think the chair has travelled.
Goes amicably later in the week.
I'll do my job. Do what I'm told.
Everybody happy?
Okay, that's clear. Can I advise members that we're moving into closed session to consider the forward work programme, and Stella's going to bring us through that. That'll only take a few minutes.
This is the Northern Ireland Assembly Committee Room 30.